Hey, what's up? Welcome to another edition of Daily Scone. Man, what a fascinating day Wednesday was in the sporting world with the Urban Meyer news. Now, if you listen to the podcast, you know this isn't a sports podcast, so I'm not here to give you my take on the Urban Meyer situation, what should happen there. But I think what today showed was evidence of just how much the landscape of sports media has changed in 2018. Like, today was a fascinating test case and validation of so many things that I talk about on this podcast and on my radio show. And I'm curious if you noticed. I'm going to get into that very quickly. Reminder, if you have not done so yet, please hit the subscribe button and tell other people to do so. That is literally how this thing grows and gains traction. So I'm not asking you for anything else. I'm not asking you to buy anything. I'm not asking you for any of that stuff. I'm just asking you, hit the subscribe button. If you like it, share it. That's all I'm asking. So, for those that don't know what happened today, Ohio State head coach Urban Meyer, there was a report from Brett McMurphy, a college football insider, that Urban Meyer knew about domestic violence charges against his now former wide receiver coach dating back to 2015 and possibly back to 2009. And McMurphy gathered this information through text messages and photographs that the alleged victim shared with him. Now, the reason this is relevant is because Meyer not only would have kept a known spousal abuser on his coaching staff for almost a decade, but also when asked about if he had knowledge, Meyer flat called Brett McMurphy at Big Ten Media Days last week a liar. And McMurphy comes a week later with this bombshell. So Urban Meyer has been put on paid administrative leave while Ohio State conducts an investigation and yada, yada, yada. But anyway, so that's the backstory. That's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is just how fascinating this is in the sports media landscape. Obviously, we have built up this culture in sports where winning is everything. And we compromise so much of our morality and integrity if it means winning. But a great example of that are the Houston Astros, who have had a zero tolerance policy, their policy, zero tolerance, when it comes to domestic abuse, yet they are in need of a closer and just traded for Osuna, and he is currently serving a 75-game suspension for domestic violence. We all winning in this culture is everything, and we're all willing to compromise to a certain point. The question is, what's the breaking point? And literally everybody has that line that they can't cross. Joe Paterno was thought to be an untouchable, and he wasn't. Art Briles, he made Baylor football relevant for the first time in a half century, and he got fired. Bobby Petrino made Arkansas nationally relevant, and he got fired. And Rick Pitino was a national championship winning coach who was given chance after chance, and ultimately he got fired. There's a line for everybody. So as elite of a head coach in the history of college football as Urban Meyer is, he's towing that line and has likely crossed it. But anyway, the point is, today is so fascinating because of how this story broke and what happened after it. So I'm today, on my day today, I, of course, host my radio show from 3 to 6 Central, but I was asked by a friend, Chuck Oliver, who hosts the Chuck Oliver Show, which is based out of Atlanta, but it's syndicated in 47 markets in the Southeast. And it's a college football show, 365, every day of the year, it's college football. And Chuck asked me, he's out today, asked me if I could guest host for him. I was happy to do so. Well, the Meyer news breaks, I'm sitting at my desk, it's about 9 o'clock Central Time, and I see Brett McMurphy's tweet, which is a link to a Facebook post. And I click on it, and I read the Facebook post, and it's a full-on article that McMurphy published on his Facebook page. I copied the text, pasted it into a Word document, and at 11-point font, it was 6 pages long. So just for context, how detailed this report was from Brett McMurphy. And what was so fascinating about that, and the timeline is relevant, I told you it was shortly after 9 a.m. Central for a reason, and the show that I had to host was at 11. The reason this was fascinating is because when a story like that breaks, typically every in the digital media era where clicks are what matter, because everything is sold at a cost per thousand. It doesn't matter how big or small your site is. It's all about generating clicks and traffic. So what you'll see very commonly is Brett McMurphy publishes this story, and then every other media outlet takes the content of his story and writes their own piece using his information but attributing. Brett McMurphy reports Urban Meyer, da-da-da-da-da. They'll link his story within it, and off they go. And it benefits McMurphy, obviously, because with the link embedded, then essentially all of these other sites are sharing his content, and he'll get increased traffic and visibility because of it from people who would not have otherwise seen his Facebook page. And all of these other outlets who are generating organic traffic are gaining the web volume as well from people who are finding it on search engine optimization, or if they just organically visit that site. So what was so interesting is that I mentioned McMurphy published his story at 9 a.m. Central Time, thereabouts. I was hosting the Chuck Oliver Show 2 hours later at 11, from 11 to 1 Central. And when I was hosting the show, I opened several windows. I've explained this before. So, like, I have my email, I have a call screen, I have my Twitter page, and I always have a web browser open, usually ESPN.com, that I can refresh for headlines. And I noticed as we were starting the show, there was nothing at ESPN.com about this story. It's been 2 hours now. It's gone viral. Like, this is the story of the day that everyone is discussing. And I keep refreshing as the show starts. We finish hour 1, nothing. We finish the show. It's 1 o'clock Central, nothing. It was roughly 2 hours after everybody else, every other outlet, had published their version of that story based around McMurphy's information, that ESPN.com finally did. And what's so fascinating about it is understanding why. Literally everybody else had reported on McMurphy's story because he's a reputable source. He was citing information from the alleged victim. He had photographs. He had screenshots of text messages. This wasn't guesswork. This was really good journalism. And ESPN did nothing. Why? So there's 2 points here. Number one, if you remember back earlier this year, or the last time ESPN went through their big round of layoffs, Brett McMurphy was part of those layoffs. So, in essence, if you're ESPN, you realize that a guy you fired, who is not officially affiliated right now with any other media outlet, that's why he went to his own personal Facebook page and reported this. The guy who you fired broke the story. It is insanely petty, and quite honestly, it's irresponsible, journalistically, to prevent your readership from getting the news they're seeking because of the source that broke the news. And, you know, when ESPN went through their round of layoffs, we talked about this. I know I've talked about it on this podcast before and in other spots. Generally, if you look at the talent that was fired, they all have something in common. It was Andy Staples, and it was Ed Werder, and it was Brett McMurphy, and Joe Shad, and it was Andy Katz. Not Andy Staples, Andy Katz, forgive me. And there's a very common Jason Stark. there's a very common underlying similarity with all of them, and it's that they're all reporters. And when ESPN was going through its round of layoffs, it made sense what they were doing, right? So in the social media era, and a lot of my friends who are journalists are not going to like to hear this, but I think they do understand it. In the social media era, ESPN paying six-figure salaries to reporters is inefficient. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you should be a news organization that's not fully staffed with news people and journalists and reporters. But what I'm saying is, if you're looking at a business model, it's inefficient because of social media, everybody's a reporter. When Odell Beckham broke his leg and went into surgery, if you're ESPN, why would you pay Ed Werder to go camp outside of the hospital and wait for some news of how surgery went and hope to get a soundbite of somebody walking out of the hospital when Odell Beckham from his hospital bed goes to his Instagram page with 3 million followers and shares photographs of his foot post-surgery and posts a message that everything went well, and that's sufficient. That's literally from the source. And it also allows for speed. And when you're talking about, like we talked about, monetarily, if things are priced at a cost per thousand, then you need whatever you can get, as much volume as you can get to churn out stories, so that way you're constantly updating your feed, so people are constantly coming back to your feed and your page and linking through your social media to continue driving traffic and volume and clicks. That's why you see so often, and I hate to say this, but there's so many reputable journalists, great people who've had wonderful careers, who will latch on to non-stories and do a little write-up around it and publish it at their website just to drive clicks, because many of them have a quota they have to meet for clicks or content they're providing. And so what happens is the standard and the quality of work devolves a little bit, or a lot, but the volume of stories and clicks is what matters, and that's what keeps up. So it's really pretty fascinating. Like, I can't tell you how many people took, like, for example, I mentioned yesterday on my radio show, I had Christian Fulton's attorney. Well, pretty much everybody, every local media outlet listened to that. They grabbed quotes from the attorney. They did a write-up around it. They attributed my radio show, which is fine, and they published it on their site because they knew it was going to get a lot of attention and clicks. If you're a reporter, especially if you're an investigative journalist, what you're doing is, so in many instances, takes a lot of time and resources for potential small payoff. Look at this case in particular with Brett McMurphy. Let's say Brett McMurphy was still working at ESPN, and he goes to his editor and says, "Hey, look, I got this lead that maybe Urban Meyer knew about this domestic violence thing as far back as 2009. I want to pursue it." So if the editor lets him go forth with it, let's say he takes weeks or months working on this one story. Well, in that time, he's not generating new content for their website that's going to drive clicks and drive attention. And the story he's working on could very well dry up and lead to a dead end and nets the company nothing. Now, in another era, that's journalism. That's how it was done. That's how the media acted as a watchdog, sort of in the checks and balances, sort of that fourth wing. But it just doesn't work that way anymore because the business model associated with the old way of doing it is failing, which is why great reporters were left without work. But the other interesting thing about 2018, which is sort of the redemption part for a guy like Brett McMurphy or anyone else, any other reporter or journalist who found themselves out of work, or for young people, who I say this all the time on this podcast, if you have ambition, start now. I did a whole episode a while back just titled Start Now. Like, go back and listen to it. the whole game has changed because everybody has distribution. Social media has completely changed the game. Not only has it changed the way that we consume our news and information, not only has it changed the news cycle, but it's changed who are reporters, because we all are. Like, if you are just average Joe citizen and you're driving down the street and you see a car on fire on the interstate that's stopping traffic, and you take a video of it with your phone, you publish it on Facebook and Instagram, all of a sudden people start sharing it, and then on the 10 o'clock news, they're airing your video with a video credit. You are the reporter. And that's more efficient and less expensive than that TV station sending a truck with a driver and a cameraman, and the fixed costs of fuel and depreciation on that vehicle and the manpower to send someone out to that interstate spot to go actually take a video of that fire when you did it for them. So, because social media has allowed this platform for everybody, a guy like Brett McMurphy today wins, because he didn't need ESPN.com or SI.com or CBSSports.com or NBCSports.com or The Undefeated or The Vertical or any other of The Athletic or any of these other websites. He didn't need it. He didn't need it. Brett McMurphy of Brett McMurphy Inc. owned today. He was the most in-demand person in sports media today. And the funny thing is, Brett McMurphy's email is on his Twitter profile. So as soon as I saw this story at 9 a.m. Central, I grabbed his email, sent him an email. It's like, hey, can you come on today? I wanted to be front of the line. And he replied. And he just said, what time? So I sent him some times. He didn't get back with me because obviously as it went along the day, he got inundated. But he had his cell phone number on his email signature. So I got Brett McMurphy's cell number. I texted him. I'm going to get him on. I'm absolutely going to get him either on my radio show or this podcast to talk about this very topic. Not Urban Meyer, not the particulars of that, because he'll report on that and do a great job, and why would he break that news here anyway? But I want to talk to him about journalistically going through this whole process, and ESPN not publishing being the last to publish his story and give him the attribution, and how the whole landscape in media has changed because of this, because of social media. Brett McMurphy didn't need ESPN.com today. All he needed was his Facebook page, his reputation. He published it, and he went viral today. And Brett McMurphy won. Now, the key is finding a way to monetize that, which I'm sure as an adult man, I hope anyway, that he's found a way to do that. But to monetize the capture of attention that he had today, because he did great work and he should be compensated for it. But in any event, it's a great lesson that if you are aspiring, start writing. Start writing. If you're really good on camera, start doing videos. If you love the spoken word, start doing a podcast. Today. Do it every day. And forget about how many people are watching your first, if you don't have 10,000 views on your first episode, you're not gonna. But just start. And if you do it consistently enough, look at, for example, this podcast that I'm doing, it's humbling, man. I have a really successful radio show by the standard of what it is. We have really good ratings in Baton Rouge, syndicated in New Orleans, got a TV deal. That is, for what it is, a success. And I'm doing this podcast, and my daily downloads or views are in the 100 range. It's a minuscule, as we're just starting, but it's a minuscule fraction. But I'm still committing to doing this every single day, because you continue to throw that line in the water, and if it's good, more and more people will come each day. And that's the hope anyway. So just start, man. Don't get discouraged. Just get going. Let Brett McMurphy today be an example that even if you're not working at ESPN.com, you can still own the day in the media cycle if you're doing good work. If you're doing good work, people will find your stuff if it's good enough. So anyway, man, just a fascinating day. Such a fascinating day in media. Not only because of the Meyer story, which is obviously a huge story, but because of how it was broken, who broke it, and part of the domino effect that played into all of that. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this. I would love your feedback. Shoot me a message. If on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this, it allows for comments, please leave them. Or email me, mattmoscona@gmail.com, MattMoscona, mattmoscona@gmail.com. I would love your feedback. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, please, 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 I would love it if you would subscribe. Just do me a solid, hit the subscribe button. And if you really enjoy it and you can think of someone who might enjoy this as well, please do me another solid and hit the share button. In the meantime, until next time, this has been Daily Scone.